Hi, my name is James, and today I'm going to build a mobile cabinet. We've recently purchased a metal lathe for our shop, and it's a benchtop model, so I'm basically building a mobile cabinet to put it on. The cabinet would work for any benchtop tool, or simply as a work surface. The bulk of the construction is going to be out of 3/4 inch thick sanded pine plywood. As each piece is cut, we'll identify what it is. The construction method that I'm going to use is the standard construction method for European style cabinets. For many years I built custom kitchen and bath cabinets. And these techniques would apply to any cabinetry that you might like to make. For the Euro style, pocket holes is my preferred method of construction, and you'll see as the piece goes together that it is immensely strong. My daughter here is cutting out a toe kick, which is typically 3 inches by 4 inches. These are cut into the cabinet sides, and in order to save time, sometimes we will stack the pieces together and clamp them and make the cut for multiple pieces at once. So if we don't get too distracted by the photobomber over there, you'll see how we assemble them. Typically I like to start with one of the sides and then the back. And the best way that I have found is to simply use a parallel clamp, although any clamp will do, and we just clamp them together up high and down low. This way we can ensure that the fit is perfectly flush and it holds it securely for us to sink the pocket screws. I like to use a drill with a clutch, and I test the pieces that I'm working with and I set the clutch just weak enough so that it doesn't drive the screw all the way through the other side. When that's done, we will put the other side piece of the cabinet on and do the same procedure. We'll clamp it high and low with the parallel clamps, get it perfectly aligned, and then go ahead and sink the pocket screws there. Next, I have turned the cabinet on its back with the front side facing up. You can tell that's the orientation because the way the toe kick is pointing. Here our toe kick is 4 inches tall, so I've put some 4-inch spacer blocks down low. I'm clamping those in to ensure that my bottom here gets screwed in even all the way across. Once more, same technique. We're going to clamp it high, clamp it low, and then we're going to drive all the pocket screws in. So if you notice here, when I get the bottom in, I now have pocket screws going into 3 different sides. This really locks this into a very rigid cube structure. It also has the great added benefit of making my carcass 100% square. If I'm careful about cutting my pieces square, then by the time I have screwed the assembly together, the assembly will therefore be perfectly square. And the last piece that we'll put in is the top. So I've rotated it all the way around, and we're going to insert the top. The top here is going to be flush, and once again the same technique. We will apply a clamp high and low, and we'll put our pocket screws in. And once more, the pocket screws are going to go into 3 different edges, which again makes this a very rigid cube structure. And there we have it. It only takes about 5 or 6 minutes to assemble one of these cabinets, and if you notice, there's no pocket screws that can be seen on the fronts or the sides. And this would basically represent your standard base cabinet system, European style. These are a little bit shorter for the purposes of having a mobile tool on top, but the concept is exactly the same. Now I'm dividing the interior portion of the cabinet into equal spaces to identify where I'm going to put my drawers. And I'm just taking a quick look at where my drawer slides might go. After measuring where I want my drawer slides to go, I'll make some spacers out of plywood. And I can use the same spacers on the left and right of each cabinet and in all of the cabinets in order to have perfect uniformity. I just run the drawer slide up against the spacer. I have it flush in the front, which I'll show you in just a minute. I'll pre-drill, and then I drive the screws in. And once that one's done, I will switch to the next size down spacer in order to put the next drawer slide in. this piece of metal?
Flush.
Flush. There are many holes in the drawer slide where the drawer slide touches the base cabinet itself, and you can really use any of them. I try to use the round holes, and I try to get about 5 screws per slide. This way the slide can carry the entire 100-pound capacity. The bit that I am drilling with is called a VIX bit, V-I-X. It's a self-centering drill bit. It'll always drill to the center of the hole so that when you put your screw in, your screw doesn't end up shifting your drawer slide left or right. And you kind of have to fiddle around a little bit and move the upper part of the slide out of your way to find the holes in order to put those screws in. So now's a good time to talk about these slides. These slides I actually buy, they're called Pro 100 slides. You can buy them from Amazon. And they're actually a whole lot cheaper than slides that you might get from, say, Home Depot or Lowe's or Rockler or something like that. Ordinarily, typically a good quality drawer slide is going to run you $15 or so. These things end up being about $5 a slide, and they're fantastic. They're ball bearing, all steel. They'll hold 100 pounds, and I'll put a link to them in the description. I guess I should have said $5 a pair. It's not $5 each. It's $5 per drawer, which does include a pair of slides. I also have a detailed set of plans if this is a project that you would like to build, and I have a link to that in the description as well. It was right about here that I realized I want to put wheels on the bottom, and my lathe weighs 500 pounds because it's a metal lathe. And I decided I needed to run a full sheet of plywood across the entire bottom, which means that those toe kicks gotta go. They're going to be in the way for me to run a full-size sheet all the way across the bottom. Luckily, it wasn't very difficult. I just set the fence on my table saw, I put them up on there, and I cut all those toe kicks off. I think this will help. It'll give me a whole lot more bearing strength for those wheels. There, that looks a little bit better. Shorter, but better, and we'll fix that. Okay, before I put that full sheet of plywood across the entire bottom, I want to go ahead and join these cabinets together. I certainly don't do this when I'm working and building a kitchen or a bathroom cabinet, but in this case, carting around a 500-pound lathe, I think I want them a little bit stronger. So I went ahead and glued them together. Then I went on the inside with cabinet screws, and I'll have a link to these screws as well in the description. And I just put it together with cabinet screws and kind of made the 3 cabinets into one continuous unit. Okay, here's that full-size bottom that I've cut. It's going to span all 3 cabinets, tie them together, and really give me a much beefier surface to hold the wheels. I've decided to inset the middle cabinet a little bit from the others, just I guess more for aesthetic reasons. And that's just going to be a cabinet that's going to have a shelf inside of it. There's not going to be any drawers. So I wanted to notch that shape out of the bottom before I actually affix it to the cabinets. Once the fit looks good, I'm going to go ahead and glue this down. I want lots of glue and lots of screws. I really want this whole thing to become integrated and act as one solid unit. And there goes another gallon of glue. I sure do use a lot of that stuff. I'm using 1¼ inch screws here because I do not want them to penetrate through the bottom of the cabinet and come up from underneath. You see I've got somebody standing on it there to hold it down tight, and I'm going to put these screws down in a grid pattern, maybe every 4 to 6 inches. These are the casters that I chose. These are very heavy-duty casters. I got them at one of the big box stores, and I think they are 250, maybe even 275-pound rated casters, but at the least I've got a 1,000-pound capacity for the mobile cart here. So one last thing that I wanted to do, and here again this is probably more for aesthetics than anything else. I kind of like the toe kick look underneath the cabinet. If I leave it as it is and flip it right side up, there's going to be a pretty big gap under those wheels all the way around, and it won't really have the look and feel of a cabinet to me. So I'm sort of crafting a toe kick here, and I'm putting it into a little grid pattern. This will also beef up the bottom, give it a little more integrity, and then hopefully when I flip it around right side up, it'll appear as if it still has a toe kick underneath it. And I suppose that's not too bad. Obviously I had to leave some allowances there for the wheels to spin all the way around. And a little testing, and it looks like it wheels pretty nicely. Now the next thing is I need to tie the tops together. I need to put some plywood across the top in order to hold this lathe. I suppose it would probably hold okay like this, but here again it's a 500-pound lathe, so I really want to beef this up. I want to put 2 layers of plywood, but I don't have 2 full-size sheets that would fit. So I'm actually going to run, for the bottom layer, I'm going to run 2 pieces. I'm going to run them lengthwise for maximum strength. And this is the first of the 2 layers that's going down now. It's glued. I didn't glue quite all the way to the edges because I didn't want to clean it up. And I'm putting the screws again in a grid pattern. Once again, it helps to have somebody stand on it. That way I can put the screws down securely, the piece stays flat, and then the screws will act like a clamp until the glue dries. Okay, what you see here is actually a crisis situation at King's Fine Woodworking. We ran out of glue, the Type Bond 3, which is my favorite glue, so I had to use a mix of a couple of different glues I had standing around. I thought I had a backup gallon, and I didn't, but I'll make sure that never happens again. And of course this needs a whole bunch of screws, so luckily my daughter and her boyfriend are under there putting this together. And I think they might have gone just a little bit overboard. If we take a look here, yeah, I don't think we needed 10,000 screws. 9,500 probably would have done. They seem quite pleased with their work. Okay, so it's time to cut the drawers. I've made a quick cut list for the drawers. And what I'm going to use for these is actually some scrap pieces of 3/4 inch plywood. Just little bits, odds and ends that have been left over from past projects, and even some pieces that have been disassembled from past projects. Rather than throw it away, I thought I would keep it and use it someday, and this is what I'm going to use it for. I'm also going to build these drawers differently than I did for my extreme miter station. That video is available if you want to look at it. But in that video I used dovetails. Not everybody has a dovetail jig, and not everybody wants to make them. So I'm going to make these drawers very, very easy. I'm going to use pocket screws, some finishing nails, glue, and regular screws. And you can see how it comes together. And these are actually every bit as strong as dovetails if they're assembled this way. They're also much, much faster to make. When I cut the 16 drawers worth of dovetails for the other job, I think I was doing that for about 2 days, assembling those drawers. The 10 drawers for this job took me about 3 or 4 hours total, so there's a big difference in time. These are the drawer bottoms. This is a technique that you can use if your piece is wider than your chop saw will cut by just a tiny bit. You can bring it all the way out, lift up the wood a little bit, and that'll finish the cut for you. And here's our drawer parts ready to go. I'm going to start the assembly by holding them together and using a crown stapler. You could also use a finish nailer here if you like. It's just a real quick way to put the pieces together in order to get the right shape so that we can move forward to the next step. Now I'm going to put a layer of glue around the bottom, and I'm actually going to glue the bottom panel directly onto it. Don't worry, when we're done here it is going to be very strong. After the glue goes down, I'm going to use that same crown stapler and I'm going to tack it all the way around. And then I will get back to the sides after this is complete. Now the sides, we didn't show this on camera, but I did pre-drill the sides for pocket holes. It's the same technique that I showed earlier in the video. And so once that's done, we're going to go in and we're going to put the pocket hole screws into the sides. This kind of gives us a little bit of extra strength there. And I accidentally cut the ends of several of the drawers too long, so I'm just using a flush trim bit to trim those up. Next, we're going to go ahead and put some screws in. I've created this little jig here. This allows us to draw on the edge of a piece of plywood, and it marks a line. It's got a 3/8 inch groove in it. Marks a line right down the center of the plywood, so I don't have to do any measuring. You can see my daughter using the jig here. A pretty simple tool to make, and she's just going to draw this all the way around the base of the drawers. This is basically putting a line exactly at 3/8 of an inch, and now she doesn't have to do any measuring. She can go in and pre-drill for us to put some screws in. Okay, so these drawer bottoms were first attached with glue, then I went around with a row of crown staples, and now I'm going all the way around with a row of screws. So this is actually a very strong drawer. I don't think it'll ever come apart, and it's a very easy to assemble system. It's my youngest daughter, Sai, in the front, and my middle daughter, Maya, in the back there. I think they might be racing each other. Okay, so before we install the drawers, I like to give them a thorough sanding. Okay, so the installation is fairly straightforward. I have some spacers that are cut exactly 1/4 of an inch thick, which is what I measured I wanted them to be. We go ahead and we push the drawer all the way in. I put a little bit of weight on the drawer in order to make sure that it sits down flat and tight on the spacers. And we'll just pull out the inside portion of the drawer slide, which is what we're going to screw into the drawer. You want to make sure that it's lined up flush with the front of the drawer, and you want to pull it out just a small amount as you can in order to still put a screw in. Maybe 2, 3, 4 inches, something like that would give you plenty of access to get the first screw in. And then once the first screw has gone in, we'll pull the drawer out just a little bit more and go for the second screw. And we'll just kind of proceed like that until we have about 5 screws in. And that's what it takes in order to get this drawer to its capacity of 100 pounds. And it's a fairly quick procedure to get them all in. You can see that a few of the fronts of those drawers have some pocket holes which were old from a previous project. This was some scrap wood I was using, but they will be hidden by the drawer fronts. I do still have some walnut left over from a kitchen project I did about a year ago now. I used a lot of it for the drawer fronts for my extreme miter station build. And I'm going to use the rest of it up here today to cover the fronts of the drawers for this cabinet. It's walnut plywood, of course. It's not actually solid walnut. And because it is plywood, we want to use some edge banding to cover up those edges. The edge banding I like to use has an adhesive on one side. It's activated by heat, so we use an iron to put it on. We typically cut it a little long, maybe about an inch, ½ inch or an inch longer than it needs to be, and then hold it in place and iron it on. You can press it down once it's been ironed on with a roller if you have one, or you can just kind of press it down with your hand or turn it over and press it down against the table. Anything works, you just want to make sure that it makes firm contact. Once the glue has cured, we flip it upside down, use a razor knife to just trim the edges. Keep it flush with the edges. And then, of course, a trimming tool, which I can put a link to that also in the description. This trimming tool trims off the edge banding to be perfectly flush with the wood. Once the edge banding is complete on the 2 long sides, I typically go to the short sides and repeat the exact same procedure. My daughter Maya here is the edge banding expert. She's probably done thousands and thousands of feet for all the kitchen cabinets that we've done. You will need to spend a couple of minutes maybe with a 220 grit sandpaper just to touch up the edges and make them smooth once you've cut them flush. And now it is time to put them on the drawers. I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do this. First thing we're going to do is put a spacer down, and that kind of gives us our height measurement and keeps the gap between the drawer fronts the same. The tool I'm going to use first is a tool, I think it's by Rockler. It is a drawer front installation clamp, which is pretty handy. It helps especially in situations where there is not a drawer below the existing drawer. It's got pins on the side to kind of help us shift the drawer front left or right. That way we can keep them all in line as we go up. Once that's in place, and you can actually slide the drawer open and close even with that in place. Once that is in place, I like to clamp over this again with maybe some squeeze clamps to hold it firmly in position so that I can now screw the drawer front into place. And I'll do that. Typically I use a pocket screw, a flat head, like a pan head screw, or even a cabinet screw. Anything works great. Put about 3 or 4 screws here. This will securely attach the drawer body itself to the drawer front. And that's about it. That's all it takes to really dress up the fronts of these drawers. Now I want to turn my attention to the plywood top that goes around the top of the entire cabinet. I think I'm going to go ahead and dress this up with a band of walnut, which will sort of match my drawer fronts. I like to put a miter on one side and then take it over to my workpiece, mark it rather than measure it. That will give me an exact point to cut the other side at. It helps to have a couple of hands for an installation like this as well. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and glue both surfaces. I've got a couple hands to help me, and I'm going to drive a few pin nails in to help also, and then we're going to clamp it in place to dry overnight. And my daughter sighed the photobomber. She might like doing that more than she likes woodworking itself. So while that's drying, I am going to turn my attention to the cabinet door, which is for the center cabinet. What I've done is created a story pole, and I've put 2 pieces of plywood to mark the location of the bottom of the story pole. We'll see what that does in just a minute. And I've got 2 points marked out on the story pole, which is the center points where I want the hinges to go. I'm going to make lines from those 2 points, and I'm going to use Euro hinges, which have hinge cups on them, and I'm going to have to drill those out on the drill press. Now my daughter's using that same story pole to transfer those 2 lines into the cabinet for the other side of the hinge. So she doesn't have plywood on the bottom of her story pole because the bottom part of the cabinet is 2 layers of plywood thick. That's why I added those 2 pieces to the bottom of my door, so that when it gets installed it's going to cover the bottom 2 pieces of that plywood. And she also is going to transfer those into straight lines in order for her to mount the other component of the hinges. I am using bloom hinges, and so basically one component gets installed into the cabinet and one onto the door, and then they'll just click together. So this technique is a little bit tricky to do one-handed. So you can see my daughter Sai here, she's got some pretty good experience. She's holding the hinge piece with her right hand and she's drilling the hole with her left hand. She's using that Vicks bit, the self-centering bit. Then she's got to put a screw on there, and she's got to screw this in left-handed. And once you get the first one done, it's not too bad. It's a little bit easier to finish up the other two. And that's how we install the back part of the hinges. It's very easy to overdrive these screws and strip out the holes. You want to be very, very careful if you're using something like this impact driver, because if you ruin these holes, then you're kind of in trouble and you're not going to be able to mount the hinge in that location. But she did a good job and that worked out nice. And in fact, she looks very pleased with herself once again. Now we'll turn our attention to the cabinet door. Almost all European hinges use a 35mm bit, which is a 1 3/8 inch bit. And for the bloom, I've created a little piece of wood there that's 7mm wide, and I need to space the distance from the edge of the fence to the start of the drill bit at 7mm. This is just how the bloom hinges are designed. So when we put our hole, the hinge cup is 7mm away from the edge. I just have created that little piece of wood because we do a lot of these hinges. And the procedure for these hinges, and virtually all Euro hinges for that matter, is to drill them 1/2 inch deep. I just happen to know for my particular drill bit, 1/2 inch is about the thickness of the drill bit. So I just go very slightly further than the thickness of the drill bit, and I know I've gone deep enough. And now it's time to install the door side portion of the hinges. I use a square to kind of get it aligned exactly square with the cabinet door itself, and I just hold it. If it deviated a tiny bit, it really wouldn't make much difference. I'm going to use a VIX bit again, which is a self-centering bit. That way my screw goes into my screw hole goes into the very center, which keeps the screw centered. Once again, you want to be real careful not to overdrive these screws, because if you destroy them going in here, then you're kind of in trouble and your hinge really isn't going to go in that spot. And here we go. The wonderful thing about bloom hinges is they just clip right on. And if it didn't fit perfectly on your first try, they have 6-way adjustability. They'll go up, down, left, right, in, out, all sorts of directions. And but it looks like this one fits really well. They have that soft close feature, which is also nice. Okay, here's the other way I was talking about putting in one of these drawer fronts. It's a little bit easier because you don't need the drawer front installation clamps. You basically put your spacer down, you pull the drawers out a little bit so you have access. You put your drawer spacer down, set the upper drawer front on, and I just set my clamps on real loose. Once both of those are in place, I'll use a straight edge at the side to make sure that they are perfectly aligned, and clamp it down, and then we'll just screw it in. I think 3 screws is usually enough if it's not too big of a drawer, because we're also going to be putting on drawer handles, and the drawer handles will go all the way through from the inside. So there's going to be 2 more screws for the drawer handles, so more or less you do have 5 screws holding the drawer front onto the drawer body. And I just happen to use pocket screws there. I usually buy them in great big quantity, and they're not necessarily more expensive than other types. They work good for this, and so when they're out, I just use those. And a little dovetail saw to cut the back of the trim off flush once it's all dry. And I think a nice chamfer bit would be a good edge treatment for this benchtop tool cabinet. And at this time I just go ahead and give all of the outside pieces a good final sanding. And there's the overview of what it all looks like. I think I'm pretty pleased except for those white plywood sides. Those are really standing out and bothering me, so I think I'm going to have to give it some cherry treatment on the edge, kind of like the same thing I did with my extreme miter station. Years ago we did tons and tons of kitchen cabinets in cherry, and it seems like I've got hundreds of pieces of 1/4-inch cherry plywood sitting around, and I've kind of been using this on and off to dress up various projects. So I'm going to cut a couple of pieces for the sides of this cabinet. I think that's going to dress it up nicely. So we're going to glue it thoroughly, then we're going to hold it up into place, and I think I'm going to put it in with some pin nails to kind of clamp it down snugly until that glue dries. Now, since this is a tool cabinet that's actually going to hold my metal lathe, obviously I really want to make some handles out of metal, but I figured that's going to take me another week or so to get around to doing, and I didn't want to wait that long to finish the video, so I thought I would go ahead and make some handles out of maple in the meantime, and these actually ended up turning out pretty nice. I just want to mention one more time that if this is a project that you're interested in building, I do have a comprehensive set of plans available, and I'll put a link to those in the description. I could probably describe what I'm doing here, but it would take a long time, and I think in just a few seconds it'll be obvious what the shapes of these handles are going to be. We want to carefully pre-mark the fronts of all of the drawers so that we have some consistency in where the handles go. And I'm drilling all the way through the drawer bodies themselves here with a bit that's the same size as the outer diameter of the threads of the screw. And then I'm pre-drilling into the back of the handle with a bit that's the diameter of the inner shaft of the screw. That way the screws fit pretty easily through the drawer body and they screw in snugly into the handle. And that's about it. Pretty straightforward, and I think those will do nicely until I get around to turning some nice metal handles. Okay, one of the last details here is I'm going to put a shelf inside of the cabinet so that I've got 2 levels to store things on. I'm just going to screw a shelf bracket in. I may want to change this later, or I may want to take it out altogether. I'm not real sure what I'll do. But for the time being, I think I'll put in this bracket and stick a shelf on top of it. Alrighty, finally we are down to the finish. I was actually going to use my big sprayer and I took it out and there was something wrong with it. I could not get it to spray, so I had to resort to using spray cans to finish the project. I always keep spray cans on hand for small projects, and I usually use my compressor with my big sprayer for larger projects like this, but it wasn't available. Fortunately, this only took about 3 cans to complete, so it really wasn't too bad. I am using a semi-gloss lacquer finish made by a company called Deft, D-E-F-T. Over the years, this has become my favorite finish. Lacquer is a very hard, very durable finish, and it looks beautiful. You can see here it really pulls out the grain in this cherry on the side, and it stays looking like that forever. It's just a fantastic finish to use. Very easy to fix if you damage it as well. Okay, and there's kind of the overview after I had 26 people help me set that lathe on top. Somehow, I think that lathe will never be that clean again. My daughter's boyfriend is going to spin it around here to show us that it's still pretty mobile, even with the considerable weight, so I'm pretty happy with that too.